Hello, everybody, and welcome back to PR News Live this week. I'm Nicole Schumann. I am a reporter for PR News, and I'm excited to have a new guest with us today, Caroline Jones of Social Media Club. And we've got some really great things to discuss. For those of you, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. We're excited to see you. And social media is a huge part of PR, much more so than it had been in maybe definitely 10 years ago, but even 5 years ago, even maybe 3 years ago. We're all doing so many different things at the same time right now. So social media remains a huge part of public relations and what they do. Many PR officials, as well as social media managers and directors, they're really on the front lines of everything that's going on for brands and organizations. So we're happy to have Caroline with us today. I wanted to let you all know, if you do have any questions today, just pop them into the comments and we'll get to them throughout the chat. So I'd love to hear from other people and see what they have to say. And if they have any questions about things that they're working on in their own social media worlds or PR worlds, we'd love to hear it. So I want to introduce Caroline first. Today's organization's guest represents a real special place in my heart. It's helped so many communities understand social media marketing as it was coming into its own and continues to for so many years. Back in 2010, we started a chapter of Social Media Club in Buffalo, New York, where I'm from originally. And it just catapulted and became one of the things that people really utilized to learn more about how to integrate social media into their marketing and their branding and their practices. So I'm so excited to have Caroline here. As I said, Caroline Jones, she's the executive director of Social Media Club, and they define themselves as a global membership organization for social media professionals to come together, learn best practices, collaborate, and grow with a rapidly evolving industry. And outside of Social Media Club, Caroline is a freelance digital marketing consultant and career coach based in Des Moines. So you've had an interesting year living in Iowa, I'm assuming.
Yes, it has been. Thank you for having me. It's really great to be here.
Yeah, you too. So today we're going to be talking about Social Media Club, some of its objectives and programming, as well as the intense pressure that social media managers are really under nowadays. Brands are making moves left and right and changing their ideals and messaging to match the cultural and systemic changes that we're all going through. And social media managers, as we were saying, are typically the ones on the front lines to facilitate the public reaction and conversation regarding brands and the actions that they're making. So we're going to get to this week's PR news story, and I'm going to do a little screen share here. Oh, you know what? And I don't have it up right now. I'm always so bad at this. Anyway, the piece, I'll have it up in a second. The piece that we're talking about is how to navigate being dragged during a social media crisis. Now, I'll be honest with you, a lot of people did not know what a drag was on social media. I guess that's a term that's come up within the past year or 2 years. And it's basically your social media brand getting dragged through the mud during a crisis of PR or branding or reputation on social media channels. So I did clarify that in the story. Okay, now I have the article up. So I am going to share that with you all if you haven't seen it. Here we go. Okay, great. And yes, I'm sure many social media managers have made this face when seeing is being attacked on social media. So
absolutely.
People tend to go to social media now when they're most upset at brands, and quite noticeably so during the past few months of turmoil with COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement. This week, we've seen a lot of disappointment with consumers with brands like Starbucks and Major League Baseball and Wendy's, and people are continually looking and waiting for messaging or results from these brands. So Caroline, first I want to ask you if you've ever been in this position ever, and what it's been like, and what managers can learn from this sort of thing.
Sure. And thankfully, knocking on wood, it has been a long time since I've been in this situation, but early on in my career, I was a social media strategist for Better Homes and Gardens. And this was, as a large brand, sometimes, like you said, you can get dragged into a crisis of it could be a crisis of your own making, or it could be potentially just saying something at the wrong time when it's just not your turn. And I think we've seen a lot of that over the years. But what had happened, I would say the biggest PR issue we had to deal with, one morning I woke up and we had thousands and thousands and thousands of bare breasted, full photos of women breastfeeding their children. And we had no idea what this was about. And my first step was going to my manager and figuring out what had gone on. And it come to find out, a freelance columnist for Yahoo News had written a blog post like the 10 commandments of breastfeeding, or something like that. And there were a number of controversial points that she made in her article about that. And in her bio, it said that she was a contributor for Better Homes and Gardens. So by virtue of proximity, people that's a very sensitive topic. I think and that's nothing that Better Homes and Gardens ever delved into. That's not parenting isn't something that the brand focuses on. And so that was something where we had to really, it was more about how the company was going to respond. And, of course, we worked together with our crisis PR team and our editorial and marketing teams to, let the readers know, and external audiences that had come to join the party, if you will, that we were aware of the situation. We were investigating what was going on. I think that's depending on the situation. I think if you don't always have an immediate response, sometimes I think it's a good measure to say, hey, we'll be right back. We're working on this. We're getting to the bottom of this, and we'll be right back. I think that's okay sometimes. And that was sort of the route we took. But within a few hours, we had our full response posted and had, I was the one relaying the messages or responses that we determined that we needed to respond to, or what we needed to clarify. But by no means was that something that we wanted it to be a negative reflection of the brand, as that's just not something that the brand posts about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great example of just the, how important it is to be intertwined with other departments in marketing and communications when you are working for a brand. It's a great example of media monitoring and listening and social listening and seeing where things are coming from, where they occur. And a lot of times when you find that root of the issue, that can really help in how you're going to react. As you're saying, you're able to see this article and how people were reacting, and you're able to craft a response from there, which I think is really important. In referring to the article, I know that's interesting because you mentioned that's not really something that, that your brand was really big on uncovering,
that just wasn't our lane. And so it was strange. But writers can contribute to multiple, or if you've ever been a freelance writer contributing to multiple brands and outlets, it's just kind of part of it. If you're putting that in your bio, people will associate that with you.
Yeah, and in a lot of these crises, it's the brand that's really getting pulled in from the middle. If you read the article, Sarah Chapman talks about her time managing community for Bounty paper towels, and the time that President Trump traveled to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, and was throwing paper towels out into the crowd, and people didn't really respond so kindly to that. And Bounty was pulled into the middle simply because they are a paper towel brand.
Right.
And in this instance, Sarah talks about taking a step back and saying, okay, maybe it's not even our part to comment here.
Right. And I think that was some really great advice, because sometimes you just don't want to fan the flames. And when there's sort of this dumpster fire that's taking hold, you don't really want to make it about you when it's not about you. Even if others are trying to do that, if you don't engage it because there's not really a need to, then you're not embroiling yourself in it. But then there are times when staying silent is the worst thing you could do. But I don't think that was the case for the Bounty with that story.
Yeah, she talks too a little bit about, similar to what you dealt with, and that they had to take a look at their brand tone. And for Bounty paper towels, they're a heritage brand. They're not a sassy brand that can go and make jokes online, or they're dependable, they're stable, and they really had to think about their brand reputation and their tone and their voice when if they were going to make some sort of statement about it. And ultimately it turns out they didn't make a huge statement about it, which worked for their benefit, and the crisis did pass by. But it was definitely interesting to see that reaction there. And the article is great. There's a couple other examples in there of different brands and how they've dealt with crises on social media, as well as some advice for social media managers, which are I've talked with a lot lately. I'm sure you have as well. Are really dealing with a lot right now.
Yes.
I'm sure you've chatted with some as well.
Yes. Our industry's in turmoil. The world's in turmoil. People are in pain. They aren't certain if they have a job. It's just, we're all working at home now. Some people are now also like, they may either be completely isolated, or they may be trying to focus with the entire family in tow, while possibly also trying to educate their children, or, maybe cave and let them play on their iPad all day just to get through a call. But it's a challenge, and that was sort of our baseline crisis. And we now are in the midst of Black Lives Matter movement, really, and it's not showing signs of slowing down, and it shouldn't. It's really let us all bear witness to the pain and the struggle that many people face just in their daily existence. And it's tough right now. And what to make it worse, I think, with now we can't go to events, we can't there's much less to do. There's not new movies, there's not sports to watch. Everything's online, so our attentions are now more than ever we're staring at screens, and businesses now are relying on social media more than they ever had. I think it's always kind of been important within the last 5 to 10 years. People, brands and businesses and companies really started to see the value, but now it's like the weight of your business's ability to stay afloat is now placed on the shoulders of your social media team. And oftentimes they're not fully supported, or now there are multiple people within the organization who are suddenly experts and want to be involved with all of things that it can be a lot to try to manage. And especially if you are not supported, or if you're not in a position of leadership, you may not feel like you can assert what needs to be said to your superiors.
Yeah,
so there's a lot going on.
It's a great time. It's a great learning experience. I mean, nobody wants to go through it, but most certainly almost all social media managers will at some point. But it was so funny. I read an article this week. I just thought about it. It came in it's from Singapore, from the Sunday Times in Singapore. And it talked about the, what people consider essential workers versus unessential workers. And people named social media managers and PR managers as non-essential. And I just thought about it, and they did get a lot of backlash regarding the study, and more people wanted more background and those sorts of things. And I just said, right now, if you don't have somebody managing and and listening to what people are talking about, saying about your brand, you might not come out of this on the right side. It can really hurt you. So I think they're more than ever.
Yeah, it can certainly change. Things can escalate really quickly. Whether it could be a crisis of your own making, or just other things going on coming together to make that perfect storm.
Yeah, we did get a question in. How do you define a social media crisis?
I think that's a great question, because too often we think about major brand fails, and it can be so much more than that. It could be whether it's a national crisis, and like 9/11, or mass shootings, or just something really bad happening. All of a sudden it's like, maybe I shouldn't promote my 50% off membership promo today. But so that can be a crisis where you're not able to participate in the conversation without creating further harm for your brand, because we're all kind of depending on social media now. And it's like, we've seen a lot of brands I've seen a number that have had things on hold since late May. And you have to wonder, what's going on? Are they able to post? Or it could also be something at the local level. I had a social media client that was a local restaurant, but one of the top restaurants in my city, their kitchen caught on fire. And I was at a football game with my father that day with very limited cell phone service. So I could see all these alerts coming in, but I couldn't send anything out. And I actually had to leave the football game and go take care of that, because make sure everything was okay. We had to work with letting the media know that things were going to be okay, responding to customers who were concerned. Restaurant owners have lots of friends. That's why they're in business. So letting people know, we've got this under control. Yes, we're sad, but everybody's okay, type of thing. And so a crisis doesn't necessarily have to be a major oopsie. It could just be an actual business crisis.
Mm-hmm. Or a reaction to something going on. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And is there a way that, social media managers can prepare for this?
I think so. When I've worked with a number, especially if you are a customer service heavy brand, or you are prone to receiving sharp criticisms of your product, service, or offering, is that I kind of like to define a little framework for my clients of okay, what's a threat level yellow? I use threat level yellow, burnt sienna, which is orange, but the client thinks it's red, but it's really orange. And then threat level red, and kind of working with clients saying, okay, here's what needs to happen when it's a low level threat. I think the orange is a critical threat, because it could easily become a threat level red, and ensuring that it doesn't become one, getting it back down to yellow. Or if something is just right out the gate, threat level red, what's the first response? And clarifying with either your client, if you're a freelancer or an agency, or working with your teams to establish what the protocol is, who's first in command in the situation, or if someone's on vacation, who's number two. Because too often we see everybody rushing in, and that can actually slow things down. I think Chapman might have mentioned that in part of her story or her responses, may have been another article. But I think that's really important, is empowering the people who are on the front lines, because they know how the audience will react to a message. If you say this exact word, it could be great or it could be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important, is developing your plan. In the past week or so, I've worked with some of our teams to kind of go through a little fire drill, if you will, of like, not necessarily like creating like a false crisis, but kind of outlining, here's what we expect if something's happening, especially with our local chapters. They have a lot of autonomy to represent their own voices and create their own programming, but we work together to ensure that it's cohesive with our overall brand structure, and ensuring that if, like, what if something happened to your social media manager? Like, would another team member be able to step in? Would they be able to get access? But so ensuring that everything's not all tied to one person, but oftentimes with a social media crisis, a smaller team can actually be better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And speaking of autonomy, I mean, especially people that, run social media club organizations in their localities, they do occasionally become somewhat of public figures, whether they're,
Yes.
pinged for, interviews on social media stories or marketing stories, communication stories, those sorts of things. So we did get a question from Melanie, which I think is interesting. She says, what I often see is people forgetting that even though they have a personal Facebook page, they are also associated with their brand and job. How do you have a conversation with employees to be mindful of posts during this time? So many people have opinions and beliefs, and, what are they supposed to do?
So I have personal opinions, but I also have professional recommendations. I personally, you can say on your Twitter bio, opinions are my own, retweets don't equal endorsements, but it's not going to stop you from losing your job. It's not going to prevent you from any sort of backlash. So I think that it's important to clarify in some cases, but I don't know that it's not legally binding. So, but I do think it's important that people are mindful that if they are speaking out on their issues, that they are, doing it as themselves, or if they are acting on behalf of Social Media Club, just kind of ensuring that it's in line with what our mission and values would be. We do have conversations about that. But like I said, the local leaders, we work really closely with them. And if there's something that we feel needs to be addressed, we address it as a team. And I think that's what or other organizations do as well. It's not like there's trust from, if someone joins the team, it's not like there's that immediate trust. You kind of have to build up that trust and give them that empowerment once it's established. But
Yeah, I think when you're starting out, it's good to kind of lay a little bit low. After you've established yourself, people grow to know your personality, they grow to know your values, and it's okay. It's always testing the waters. I mean, that's really
right.
what it is. And I think too, things have even changed within the past few years, in terms of how people brand themselves, and even if they do work in social or communications. And I think it almost it brings greater diversity and impact to the brand they work on. So, but that really has to do with HR and companies, and I think all companies should have some sort of discussion with their employees on, what is kosher, what isn't. And, that way, the clearer they are, then people will know what they can and can't post. And I mean, I think
Right.
that's really all they can do. Gosh, oh my gosh, we have so many questions.
We have a lot. Yes.
We don't have a lot of time left, but we're trying to get to them all. This one's from McKenna. I have a quick response to this. Thoughts on deleting negative comments? Do not.
Yeah.
I have I have some friends that work in social that I've talked to that the organizations do delete negative comments, and it will come back to haunt you every time. Now, if there are some sort of, if there's derogatory language or, foul language, those sorts of things, that's totally, that stuff's off the table. Like, that has to go. But
even then, though, I might hide the comment and then reply to the person and say, hey, please feel free to repost without the language and you're fine, type of thing.
Or for posting, if you have that sort of thing.
Right. I always recommend hiding versus deleting, because if you have to walk that back, or if it becomes a bigger issue because somebody is outraged that their comment was removed, then you can say, well, actually, here was the original comment and this was our response. And, sometimes it's helpful to not, you don't want to obstruct evidence. I don't mean that in a legal sense, but in certain industries, like if you're an elected official, you can't delete negative comments. You have to leave them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we have so many comments coming in, so many questions, which is awesome. So what I'm going to say is that after this, we'll be able to go offline and we'll be able to talk with you guys in the chat as well. Because I do want to give Caroline some time to talk about the annual social media day and what that is, and what social media managers can do and companies can do to celebrate this time.
Yes. So in case you haven't noticed, so Social Media Day is coming up on June 30th, and that is, it was established in 2010 by Mashable as a way to celebrate the industry, celebrate the worker, just celebrate all things social media. For Social Media Club, we use that as like it's our holiday. It's the day of our people, and that said, I don't think 2020 is the year to forget about appreciating your social media manager. And there's a number of ways you could do that by just being a part of, like, really actively being a part of the team and facilitating their growth. And there's so much. But for us this year, we decided to focus our theme on amplifying diversity and inclusion. And I know that sounds vague, but we are a global organization, and those terms mean different things, and the laws are different across countries. So we wanted it to be a universal message that people could really get behind. And looking back on the first half of 2020, looking ahead, we knew this is what needed to happen. We're going to be seeing more brands really focusing their efforts on diversity and inclusion. And to Chapman's final point in your article, it's not enough to have that big message. You need to specifically say what you're doing internally for your organization. And for us, our focus will be about how can senior leadership at companies better amplify diversity and inclusion within their social media team. We can't fix every organization's diversity and inclusion problems, but we can share how they can better support their social media manager and their digital marketing team. How the rising social media professional or the freelancer, the aspiring influencer, how they can better amplify diversity and inclusion through their own work and through collaboration and partnerships with other organizations, other groups, other voices. And I think that will move the needle in some respects as far as how we can respond to this. When I go through our social media feeds, I've been seeing a lot of like on that Blackout Tuesday, how everybody was posting the square. And I know there were mixed opinions on that, but we were also seeing a lot more Black content creators or persons of color that work in social media. And within our own organization, we have at the global and the local leadership levels, like we have diversity of women and people from different cultural backgrounds. And that's something that's always been important to us, but we can always do more and we can always amplify. And so that's sort of where our message is coming from this year. But detailed best practices will vary by industry. So we'll be looking to bring in different speakers from different industries to kind of talk about what they're doing and what they recommend. And but whether you are entry-level staffer, C-suite executive, consultant, influencer, or work in nonprofit, higher ed, social media professionals can really amplify diversity and inclusion by focusing on three things. And those are listening, learning, and sharing. And we can explicate on what that means, but by social listening programs, knowing what's important to your audience. If you're a senior leader, listening to your team. If you're a young professional, but you're just trying to figure out how to navigate all this and be a better person, like listen to your friends, listen to other people, just be a part of it. Learning, like there's so much that we all think we know, but I think we've all learned that we don't know that much and that there's always more we need to learn. And by sharing, whether that's your voice, and I think some people may get it, they may stumble over their words, they may not always get it perfectly, but sharing what you've learned, sharing about your experiences, sharing the work of others, recognizing, championing, be uplifting and supporting and championing your teams, your partners, your friends. It's a simple model, but yeah, I think it can be applied to other things, like responding to a crisis. Listen to your audience, learn from the situation, and share what you've done and what you're planning to do and how it'll be better going forward.
Yeah, I think there's always room to learn, and you guys provide some great resources. For those of you that are more interested in learning more about crisis, you guys have an event coming up on July 9th.
Yes, and it's great timing for this. We are hosting an event with Jen Hartman, who's the Director, Strategic Public Relations at John Deere, which is in the Quad Cities, but household name. And she is she's been on the PR team for, I believe, 10 years or so. Lost her bio, but she served in the PR capacity, but at the beginning of March, her mentor and predecessor of the department retired, so she then absorbed social. So she suddenly got a crash course, and she had come from the traditional PR background, and now she's immersed in the social media field and what it's like. And if anybody follows her on Twitter, she's constantly posting inspiring, aspirational, uplifting messaging around what, social media managers, your job is important. Like, I think it's important because over the past 10 years, I haven't always heard that from my PR colleagues, that they've kind of treated us like the little sister. And I think more and more PR professionals are really realizing that it's not just this little thing. It's much, much more than that. And so she'll be talking about, I think the title of our event is like 20 years experience within 3 months. And so I can certainly share a link for folks to register, but you could also go to our website, socialmediaclub.org, and there's information there as well.
Great.
We are looking forward to having her.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. And, PR folks that are watching, if you don't do social media, if you're not involved with it, you could be at some point. So
you might find yourself there, whether you like it or not.
So good to listen to Jen's story, and, looking forward to hearing that. We'll drop the link in the chat. I wish we had more time, but we try to keep these shorter so people can get on with their day. And I know you have stuff as well. But I just want to thank you for the time, for joining us today. This was great. There's so much to talk about in social. We could go on forever. So hopefully we'll have you on again sometime. That would be great.
I'd love to.
Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we know you all have been working really hard between the pandemic and the social movements going on right now. So we have been trying to create programming to help you guys out. Just a note, we released a guidebook on crisis management. It features a special COVID section. It's filled with tips and examples from top communications pros, some case studies to learn from. So you can find it on our website, prnewsonline.com, but we'll also share the link in the chat if you are interested in more on the crisis guidebook. So I want to thank you all again. We'll see you here next Wednesday. We have Justin Buckbinder from Fin Partners on, and he's going to talk about pride and social media and all kinds of fun stuff. We're excited to have him on. And just everybody stay well. It's an interesting time to be alive right now. So there's a lot of good things happening though. It's a tough time, but there are good things happening. So just have to keep that in mind every day. But thank you again, Caroline, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.